in this session, we're going to talk about how to deploy HotSpot from a cloud model. So if we look at our earlier labs, we have been always following the on-premise model. So the HSG is an on-premise gateway, and then you have the AP connecting to the local switch and broadcast the SSID. So the AP really just broadcasts the SSID and trunk, or rather bridge the SSID to a VLAN and trunk all the way up to the HSG. So if you have multiple SSID, each SSID maps to one specific VLAN and trunk to HSG, and you will activate a HotSpot controller for each VLAN. So in this design, the HSG basically does all the clever stuff. The AP is really just broadcasting the SSID and bridge the SSID to its respective VLAN and route the traffic up to the HSG. So the HSG is a HotSpot controller, is a AAA server. A radio server is serving as a captive portal server as well, and it's an AS server. So if you look at our earlier labs design, is very much following the on-premise model. So if you have read the documentation before, so the lab is really an on-premise model. So you have the HSG as a gateway, AP, and broadcasting the SSID. And in this, the difference between this lab here and the design here is this design is more generic. That means because the HSG is an open architecture, so you can support third-party AP. So if you're using third-party AP, the AP will be managed by its own local controller, and the controller would trunk the traffic up to the HSG. So if you use MAP, which has the controller as a software module, sits inside the HSG, and you'll be having this topology. So it will be a simplified topology. So in today's lab, we're going to use the cloud model, or the central design model, where the AP actually sits in a remote location, and the HSG is in a central location. So in this design, the AP can be anywhere. It can be over the internet for the AP to connect back to the HSG. So the AP here now, he will have to serve as a HotSpot controller. So as a HotSpot controller, that means the AP will actually issue DHCP IP address to the users. And also you will have to do address translation, because he cannot bridge the traffic or the trunk, the VLAN up to the HSG over the internet. If you look at this design, and the AP will broadcast SSID and map the SSID to individual VLAN and trunk all the way up to the HSG. So in this design, it's not possible to bridge, or rather to trunk the SSID to the HSG over the internet. So the AP will be functioning as the HotSpot controller to redirect the user request to the landing page, and also issue DHCP IP address to the users and broadcast the SSID. So you can still broadcast multiple SSID and map to different URL on the HSG. So the HSG now, he will not function as a HotSpot controller anymore. It will only function as a reader server, or the AAA server with the captive portal. So most of the time you'll function as these two key feature, but of course, since you're using our MAP, and you will function as an AP controller as well to manage the AP's configuration and also monitor the AP status. So in the next half an hour, today's lab is going to be a little bit longer, because we're going to go into a lot of details. So in this lab, I have the HSG and I have the MAP. So the HSG really, again, can be sitting anywhere over the internet as long as it's accessible by the AP. So the HSG has to be, in real deployment, the HSG has to be publicly accessible by the AP. So it's usually in direct internet connection with a static public IP address, or if there's a firewall in front, it has to do a do a static NAT for the HSG so that the remote AP can be connecting to the HSG directly. The AP here can be having a dynamic IP address. It can be behind another router because the AP will initiate a connection to the HSG. Okay, so the AP can be sitting behind, for example, like this design, you can be sitting behind another router. Or if it's a fiber connection, for example, ONT, which issues a DHCP IP address to the AP using a RJ45 connection or the UTP connection, so you can connect to the AP directly, because the AP does NAT, it does address translation, so he will hide all the private IP address, which is the wireless users, over to the public, or is WAN, or rather is Ethernet interface IP address before the traffic is able to break out. So in this case, you don't even need a router. Okay, if you're having some kind of Ethernet modem or PPPoE modem, or you're having fiber ONT connection, you just plug into the AP directly. But if you need multiple AP, you still need to have a router which connect to multiple IP. So this will be a more typical design where, because most of the ISP do provide AP as a bundled offering together with a line. So you just plug the AP to that existing router, and you configure it, so you will straight away go and register with the HSG, and you can start to manage the configuration on the HSG. So what is needed to configure on the HSG now? Okay, if you look at, I have an HSG. I'm going to SSH into the HSG. So as you can see, you really just need to configure the WAN interface. It can be, most of the time in real deployment, the WAN interface is having a static IP address. Okay, because I'm running this in a lab, so I plug into my lab switch and getting the DHCP from the upstream router. So that's all you need to configure. You just need to configure the WAN IP address and some other host IP address configuration. Those are all default config there, and you just permit default rules. Then you need to start MACC so that you can manage the remote APs, and you can also you need to turn on the radio server, which is need to do the authentication. Remember, you need to have that key features. You need to have AAA server. You function as a captive portal. You also need to function as a AP controller to manage the remote MAPs. So if you compare this configuration with the earlier HSG, you'll find it's very different now. So if I download the earlier MAP config, you will actually, in the early config, you actually have VLANs to map to the SSIDs, which is broadcast by the AP. And on the AP, you would configure the SSID and bridge that SSID to a VLAN and trunk all the way to the HSG. And then on the HSG, you will turn on a HotSpot instance for each of the VLAN. So then the HSG basically function as an all-in-one appliance. In this case, here, and the HSG is not doing HotSpot. It's not doing any running any HotSpot instance. Okay, because the HotSpot instance now runs inside the MAP here. Okay, so I'm going to prepare the configuration for the HSG. Log into the HSG. By default, the CMS config here is in splash.ransnet.com. So I have changed to its public IP address. Okay, in real deployment, this will be a public IP address. In my lab is a private IP address. That's basically for the convenience. So you just have to remember this IP address need to be changed to an IP address that is being accessed by the actual remote users and also the remote MAPs. Then I will configure the CMS. So I will create a CMS portal So it's basically where the landing page, or rather the login page, when the user initiates the browsing request, it will be redirected to this page. So I would choose a template that I like. So let's say V3, which is the latest version, then assign to entity. I just name it Cloud MAP portal. So then you can preview the portal look and feel. You can customize that by clicking on the portal name. And then I will need to, you need to decide what are the features you want to enable for this portal. So one very key point to take note is you have to define the portal type. Because this is an all-in-one, is a universal template now, which supports both on-premise and remote, or rather cloud deployment. So if it's an on-premise deployment, that means this portal is for HSG. It is for this kind of scenario where this function is an all-in-one gateway. Then you will need to select the portal type as HSG. If it is for a remote deployment, or rather cloud deployment, where the portal is actually, the HotSpot controller is actually sitting on a remote MAP, then you will define as Wifidog, because the MAP actually runs Wifidog HotSpot instance to intercept the user browsing request. So you will select Wifidog in this case. And all other settings are similar to our previous labs. The user info basically defines what are the user parameters you want to capture during the self-registration or for the social media logins. Then you configure your login method, how you want users to log in. If it's using just direct access only, or you require them to log in with username and password. When they log in with username and password, it can be through email registration, SMS registration, or a PMS or a payment gateway registration. And when you select each of the options, you basically need to define the respective parameters. So for example, if you don't do payment gateway, you can select the payment gateway provider that you're going to use and put in the respective settings. And in this case, I'm not going to go into that complexity for this demo. So I just use the email and SMS, and also you can specify as random generated password, that means system generated password, or user define their own password, and the combination of password and the length. So I just make it extremely simple, so that I can do this. I can remember this password during the demo. The other one is the if you have selected the email registration, you can put in your own SMTP server to send the email OTP to the user. Otherwise, you'll be default using the RansNet support account to send the OTP to user email. If you have select SMS registration, you will have to put in the SMS details. Okay, so which is the SMS provider detail. You can be your own SMS gateway. So we're supporting a few APIs with some of the non SMS provider, or if you're using some custom SMS gateway solution, most of them would support sending SMS using SMTP. So that the system is like sending an email message to the SMS gateway with certain format. Then the gateway will convert it into SMS and send it to the user. So for this demo, I will be using one of our SMS provider. I'll just key in the details here. I'm just trying to get the details of the provider. Where is it? Just give me a minute. Okay, I'm just trying to use this. So when you use commercial provider service, they will give you a credential for you to point to the SMS service, so that you know, it's not like everybody can use their SMS service for free. So you have to be a subscriber of the SMS service. Then if you can enable social media login. So one point, very important point to take note is, if you're using Facebook, for example, for this kind of deployment, the gateway has to have a static public IP address, and this IP address has to be registered with Facebook, because the Facebook API allows a specific URL or specific IP address to be able to connect to their OpenNIght API for authentication. So because today it is there's some constraint in today's lab, because my gateway is in a private network, so it's not possible for me to demo the Facebook. But if you do have your gateway already having a private public IP address, you can go ahead to register and get your own app ID and token to put in here, so you can enforce Facebook login to your end users. So in this case here, I can't do it, so I just turn it off. And eventually, this is what I get as the login page, or the landing page to the end user. You can turn off and on other features. You probably just want certain simpler login ways for the users. So I have set up the gateway and I have set up the CMS. So the next is really to be able to manage the APs. So before I do the AP management, I would like to provision the configuration first, so that whoever, you know, later as we start to add on the AP to the group, they will automatically go and pull the configurations, so without having to coming back to the MACC again later. So I will configure the template to, this is basically for the cloud deployment for MAP, and I'll set an SSID as a demo cloud MAP. So the mode, previously we select bridge, then you will select a VLAN ID. So that means you will bridge this SSID to a particular VLAN. Then you will, over the LAN, you will trunk up to the HSG. So now for the remote mode, because AP is going to do the address translation, because there's no way we can bridge the SSID or the traffic here over internet to the HSG. So we would do a NAT mode. So you will actually hide the user private IP address while traveling across the internet. And so that it becomes very flexible and very mobile for you to deploy the AP. The AP can be anywhere, can be using any sort of connection, as long as it can reach to the HSG. So I will select NAT mode in this case, and for dual band radio. And so now when we use the NAT mode, and we're going to turn on the HotSpot service locally within the MAP. So we will turn on the authentication and we'll select Wifidog authentication mode. So essentially that activates the local hotspot instance has a built-in, the MAP has a built-in Wifidog hotspot instance to redirect the user request to the cloud HSG URL. Okay. So the cloud HSG here, if you look at the earlier configuration, we will put the whole URL here in our hotspot instance within HSG. But in MAP, you will not. You just need to. You don't need to put a login.php, the last portion. You just put until this part, then you will take care of the rest. Okay, that's something very important to take note. And also the gateway IP can be anything, but I will just put in something here now. I will explain why I put this IP address later, okay? So the rest is optional. You don't really have to do anything, just unchecked. So that's all you need in terms of enabling the HotSpot instance within the AP and point the login landing page to your central HSG here for authentication and the Capture portal login. So I will save here. And if you do have Facebook login, for example, social media login, you would require the user here. They would need to. You have to bypass certain IP address and domains so that they can log into Facebook before they are even authenticated to the HotSpot instance. So you were adding the domain in the command line configuration here. So I will search the online documentation for the exact syntax. Okay, so for Facebook, and there are certain domains we need to bypass so that we can get, access to log in before we are fully authorized by the HotSpot instance. So you just put in here. So what this does is you will push a series of commands to that MAP. Okay, so MAP functions as a hybrid mode. I will explain that later. What it does? What does it mean by the hybrid mode? Okay, so you'll configure that command to push to the MAP to bypass some domains. That means permit the user access before they are granted, before they are fully authenticated. And also you will do some whitelist. The whitelist here is the really the individual IP address. So the difference between here, free URL bypasses, as you can see, we are permitting the domains. If you're just permitting IP address or a specific URL, you can just add in here. Okay, so I'm going to allow them to connect to the DNS server. That's what I assigned to them. And also you have to permit them to access to the portal server, okay, before they are authorized to the, or before they get authenticated. So at least they can reach the portal server. And so you're safe. And another very important point to take note is the keep alive interval. So by default it is 3 minutes. 3 minutes can be, that means when we push the configuration to the box, it takes, so every 3 minutes, when we see the box is actually the remote MAP. Every 3 minutes, the remote MAP will try to reach the HSG to ask for configuration updates, and also upload its operating status and the user connectivity statistics. So if you set it to be 3 minutes, the interval, the updates can come in pretty slow. So I will set it to be 30 seconds so we can get faster results, especially for the demo. So that's pretty much all I need to do for setting the template. Then I will assign the template to a group so that later when I have that AP assigned to that group, then they automatically will grab the templates. Okay, so this is ready for you to preview the template configuration and you save. Okay, that's all I need to do on the template configuration. So just recap again, on the template configuration, we configure SSID, and now we use the NAT mode. And we also turn on the authentication, or rather enable the HotSpot authentication using Wifidog. Then we also bypass some domain URL for social media login, to enable social media login. So the next thing we did, so we have done the HSG configuration, we have configured the AP controller, we have configured the AAA server. This really nothing much to configure the AAA server, except you just need to enable or start the Redis service. Then you will, we have configured the capture portal, the CMS as well. So then the next is really to bootstrap the AP configuration. So I have my AP here, so it's sitting on my desk. The box is on the HSG is sitting on a remote location. So I have console. I've connect my PC to the console port of the AP. So normally you will use this console setting to connect to the AP. Okay, it's just slightly different. The baud rate is different. It's 9600 when you use HSG is 1 and 200. So if it's the new AP, brand new AP, you really you already get a fresh config. So, but my AP, if the AP has been used elsewhere, and it's the best is to reset the configuration first. Remember, we talked about the MAP operates as a hybrid mode. So hybrid mode means it works with the controller. So from controller, you can push centralized configuration and centrally monitor the AP. But the AP also can work as a standalone when the controller is inaccessible. For example, it's very different from some of the pure lightweight AP, because the pure lightweight AP is when the controller is down, the AP will lose its functionality. You will just keep on reporting because the controller holds everything, all the intelligence is in here. So the AP, without the controller, the AP will not be able to function. That happens to a lot of lightweight AP. When the controller is down or when the AP lose connection to the controller, you just keep on rebooting. Okay, you will not function anymore. But for MAP is the controller manages the configuration. Once the configuration is pushed down to the AP, it's been stored within the AP so that it can function as a standalone device, even if you lose connectivity to the controller. For example, it can be controller service is down, or can be the whole box is down for whatever reason. So the AP will continue to broadcast SSD, connect the user, issue IP address to the user. And because the configurations are stored locally. But the one thing we need to take note is, so if the AP is being used elsewhere, because it has its own stored configuration, so when we use for a new setup, for a new set of configuration, the recommendation is to reset the configuration. So basically, you would just delete its config. Text. Okay, so after you delete that config, then you reload. You will go back to factory default. You will be reset all the older legacy configuration that you have ever used before will be reset to its factory default. Then we will start to do a new set of configuration now. So the AP, as later we explain to configure the AP, you will, if there's a new factory default config, if you plug into a DCP environment, for example, behind a DCP router, he will get IP address from the router, and you will automatically try to connect to that central controller. But then for certain environment, you may want, let's say if you are putting the AP in a corporate environment, and you may ask to configure static IP address for the AP, and it doesn't matter, it can be either static or DCP, as long as the AP is able to go out to the internet and reach to the AP controller. Then you will start to register with the controller. So just waiting for the AP to boot up, and the initial boot up can be quite slow. So once it boots up, then you will be your work very normally. So this setup again, it will be very useful for F&B customers who have a lot of outlets. Then they want to do a central control in terms of the user access and capture portal and managing the AP configuration as well. And it's a very cost-effective setup in this way. So I get a fresh new box. So if you do a show run, as you can see, it works with a set of command line interface as well. So it has already the initial configuration to connect to mhcc.ransnet.com. So the initial configuration is pointing to the URL to register from there, but the URL in this case, you will go to our cloud URL. Okay, so or you'll go to some other IP address. Because the reason I'm getting this IP address because I'm in a test lab, so my DNS rewrites the URL to a private IP address. But in a real environment, this goes to the Ransnet hosted MSCC. That means is a cloud controller. But if you are hosting your own, for example, HSG, you will want the HSG to register with your own controller here. So what you do is you would basically change the host config to point this URL to the actual MAP, the actual HSG IP address, which should be a public IP address in actual deployment. In this lab, it will be a private IP address because they're all in a lab environment. So just make sure this IP address is accessible by the MAP. Okay, and so I'll just do a pin. I'm able to pin to the HSG now. And also, I just want to show that this is actually the WAN interface of the, or rather, there's only one. This is just one physical interface of the MAP. So the MAP uses this virtual interface to get IP address to go out to reach to the HSG or MSCC. So in this case, I'm using DHCP, which is from the local lab DHCP server. But if you need to configure static IP address, you just have to configure the actual IP address, and also don't forget to put your default gateway routes. So another thing I want to fine tune the default config is the default is like 5 minutes to try to register with the controller, and I'm going to make it really short so that we can see the results faster. And also we need to do a reporting. So this basically default is not set to reporting. So if you look at the documentation, actually there was a bootstrapping process or other steps for MAP as well. So we're just putting this command to ask the MAP to report its statistics or the status to the MACC. So that's really pretty much what we need to do on the AP side. Okay, again, just to recap, so that you get a fresh start. And if you're in different time zone or some other specific stuff, you can do it here, or you can do it on the controller template. You can remember the controller template can push commands to the individual to the MAPs. So it's just as if you are configuring from the command line here. Okay, so recap: you get IP address used on the bridge interface, either static or dynamic. Then you will change the host config to point the MACC URL to the actual gateway IP address, whether it's a static or whether it's a public or private, which in most instances should be public IP address. Then you will configure to send logs to the, or other statistics to the HSG MACC. Okay. Now the next thing is really to register the AP, to add the AP into MACC, because we cannot just simply allow everybody to connect to the MACC. So we basically differentiate by serial number. Now we're going to select and assign this host to, go to planning and go to the group, and you just put the serial number to that group. And remember, we have already, to this group, we have already assigned a template, and with whatever configuration that we have defined in earlier sessions. So now we just have to wait for the configuration to push down to the AP, or rather wait for the AP to come online, then you will start to push the configuration. Just to verify this again. Okay, so it's able to reach to the AP, able to reach to the MACC. Then we just wait a while. So the gateway is actually detecting the AP status now. So you should be starting to push down the configurations. Okay. So if you go to the config logs and look into the details, you will start to push the various configurations to the AP. So we just have to be a little bit more patient for the information to, or the configuration to push down. So currently config status shows not synced. So we just time you will take quite a while to push down the configuration, especially for cloud deployment, and especially when the AP is in a far remote place and with a lot of latency between HSG, it will be even slower. Okay, I'm on the radius because this was used before, so I'm going to clean up all the earlier statistics. Okay, if it is a fresh HSG, you get everything empty. So I should have reset the database, but never mind. Just track the status later. Just make sure we know what we're doing. Still pushing on the configuration. Applying the SSID. Okay, one little bit more in-depth information I want to show is, okay, the command line syntax is very similar to the HSG. It's a command line interface. You can show interface brave, or you can show IP route. And also when you should running config now is on top of the default config, and this is what we have apparently. So I'm just going to copy this out so we can compare the difference before and after the configurations are pushed down by the MACC. Okay, still pushing down. I'm going to have a short break. Okay, please come back 5 minutes later. We'll continue. I will not drop the code because once I drop, I cannot get it back. You can come back 5 minutes later. So we just wait for the configuration to push down. So it's also a good experience that you know what to expect. And bear in mind, the reason, one of the main reasons for this config slow push down is because I'm using a very low end HSG to do the demo. I want to make sure if my box works, and your box will always work. Okay, I'll see you later, 5 minutes later. Okay, guys, we're going to continue from here now. If you look at the logs, basically it says that it's all push down complete, successful. So if you go to the device, you will see the config status is synced. So now if you go back to the AP to look at the configuration, you will actually see there are some new commands being added. Okay, so this is the IP address that we bypass. So which means it's possible to let the box operate alone by configuring its own commands. So all these are the Wifidog authentication that we have enabled, and the IP address of the gateway and the URL that we use. And another very important point I want to highlight is it creates an address pool. So the address pool basically is a DHCP address pool to assign to the user. So that's where the user gets IP address. So the IP address is being assigned by MAP from its own local DHCP pool. And then there is a new interface, bridge interface created that holds that address pool, and also it does address translation. So NAT inside, and user come in from this virtual bridge interface or other virtual interface and goes out from this interface. So it's been NATed to whatever IP address that this interface is having. Okay, so that's basically how it works in terms of the command line config. And from the UI, you have seen it in the templates. It's very straightforward. So now we're going to do the test. We have configured the SSID to be demo. No, it's not that one. Demo Cloud MAP. So you will auto pop up the login page once you get an IP address. Okay, so these are the 3 login options we have enabled. So we have enabled direct access, login by email and SMS. We couldn't enable Facebook because our gateway is not having a public IP address. And also, just to explain again, why in early labs, our gateway was able to do Facebook integration even it was having a private IP address in this scenario. The reason was because this is a kind of spoof that we used. Because the URL we used was a public URL, it's a splash.ransnet.com, and we did a DNS rewrite to mbox local IP address, which is this loopback interface IP address. So when the request is being sent to Facebook, it's actually, the Facebook sees this URL, and this URL is actually registered as an official URL permitted by Facebook. So that's why they allow us to do the authentication. Okay, but when it comes to this deployment, our request is sitting behind the AP, and the AP does not do DNS rewrite. So if we use this a public URL in our portal, you just go to the cloud server. You just go to the cloud the Ransnet Cloud HSG instead of your own HSG here. Okay, so that's the reason why. Okay. So now back to the test again. So I have, so I'm just going to test the direct access. Okay, so straight away I get access. So I just need to click once. And if you go to the Redis logs, so there was a login session just now from my PC. Okay. Sorry, from my phone. So that was me. Okay. And that's basically how it works for the access. So if you have more time, you can try on other login method, whether by email, by SMS. Basically, it works the same way as the previous labs. Okay, so just one point to take note from the phone. In the early days, I was not. We were able to type like mbox.runsnet.com to check our status. And for the Wifidog integration in this topology, we are unable to basically log out from the client's perspective. We are adding a feature to allow you to log out from the gateway controller, which is not available at this moment. And so one way to make it force the user to log out is basically on the user. You will basically set the access time to be very short, or the session time to be very short, so that after a few minutes, he will be logged out. So I have set 5 minutes in preset 5 minutes for demo users. So that means if you use direct access, 5 minutes later, you will be kicked out. This is really for demo purposes, so that we can try out other scenarios without having to wait for too long. Okay, so there's nothing I can do now. I just have to wait a while for the 5 minutes to reach. And alternatively, I can log out from the console. Okay, never mind. So I just wait. Okay. Or I think due to the time constraint, we just end this lab today, and you can try out other options yourself. Try checking email and sign up. An email will send to your email address and ask you to complete the registration. It's the same as the early labs. Or if you use SMS, you will get the same. You get the same experience as well. Okay, so you just enter your mobile number and you get an OTP. So that's basically the same as using the local HSG. So this template now combines both on-premise and remote, or rather Wifidog integration. So it really depends on your topology. You just have to select the right portal type before you proceed to do everything else. Okay, that's pretty much all for today. And please send us an email if you have any other queries, and do spend some time to test out the features yourself. And thank you very much for watching for today. I will see you again next week.